friends, and welcome back for another episode, another iteration of Cultivating Courage. I'm really excited to dive in with you today, Anne. And how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Mike. Yeah, great to see you here again as always. And I think we're at number 13 now, actually. So
Lucky
we've
13.
yeah, yeah, got a few reps in. So yeah, it feels like there's a lot of energy here that we get to put into the conversation today. So that feels exciting.
Mm. Well, to tee it off, I have a quote and I have a topic that we're going to talk about. So, for a listener, the quote is from Carl Rogers. The curious paradox is when I accept myself as I am free to change, is the
Mm,
quote.
mm,
And today we're going to talk about acceptance. And I don't know if we said surrender as a word, but these are two words that in a personal development space, they get collapsed with each other a lot. And there's all sorts of like spiritual bypass comes to mind as, oh, I'm just life is happening, the universe is doing its thing. And we wanted to talk about really active acceptance and active surrender. So I guess the question I'm sitting in is, what does acceptance really mean, and how can we still have directionality with wanting change or, yeah, imposing our will while also having inner acceptance? And so there's so many ways we can go with this, but I guess I'll kick it to you first, Anne, because my mind is already racing a million ways.
mhm.
Just as I tee it off, what emerges for you?
Yeah, well, thank you for laying the foundation, and thanks for the surprise with the quote as well. I love that one, and I feel like this is just so foundational in this sort of pathway of doing the inner work. It's like how can I want something out there at the same time as being here, or how
Mm,
can I not want something here, at the same time as being okay being in it. And I think it's a really interesting paradox because it's like this concept of resistance, right? The more we resist something, the more it persists. And so that is really the power of the surrender, the power of the acceptance. And to me, it also speaks to this sort of tendency that we want to say it's either this or that, but we've always got to come back to the both and, right? It's
mm,
like I can be frustrated with what I'm feeling right now and not like this at the same time as acknowledging that this is where I need to be and it's okay and it is sort of a transitory kind of thing. So there's all these paradoxes that are very alive in this. So I guess that's the first thing for me that comes up is just acknowledging the sort of the inherent conflict in the concept, just to really presence that, really drive that home.
mm. Yeah. An example, I want to give a visual because we're on video, and an example that I come back to very frequently. I learned this from a course, and I believe David Trelevin was the presenter. He's a trauma informed coach, and he said, imagine like you have a fist up, and that fist is whatever. I'm going to say anger because anger is something that I personally resist in myself a lot. I've tagged
Mm-hmm.
that as an emotion that's unacceptable. I don't do anger, or at least historically haven't done anger. And he said a lot of times our inner work, if we look at my left hand as my mind and the rest of my body and my inner work, we try and like aggressively do something about the anger. And if you just imagine like a human being, how would we respond if someone's like trying to grab you this way or yank you this way? You say, get off of me. I don't want to do that. And what David Trelevin invites us into is, well, imagine if you just gently embrace the anger for a second and say, you're okay. You're fine as you are here. I'm with you, anger. There's nothing we need to do about this. Even as I'm talking about it, my fist just softens up a little bit, and the energy of the anger is free to, if not dissipate, it's free to move around and do as it pleases because it's not in conflict with the rest of my system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the first step there is really, if you look at that left hand of mine as acceptance of the anger, it just softens everything. You can even as I'm talking right now, I'm sure the listener and you, I could just feel that there's a little bit more ease right now, and that there's a little more availability to life. And
Mm-hmm.
so what happens there is with the acceptance, it's not this passive thing that I'm letting happen. It's just meeting reality where it is. And
Mm.
now we can sit in the question of, okay, well, now that your system is cleared, where do you want to go? Would be what I would ask next.
Yeah.
And so there's a directionality of the acceptance, right? Because the anger is pointing us towards something. And if we resist it, then there's just inner conflict. But if we open ourselves to it, it's going to teach us something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that physical example that you use of the fist and the hand. And to me, the sort of the grabbing hand, the hand that wants to control, it's almost like a metaphor for judgment,
Mhm.
right? And I think when we apply judgment to our emotions, like you said, there's a tag that's that anger is bad or wrong, or whatever that judgment is. But there's something that's not okay about that anger existing. Um, and by actually transforming that and going, okay, that the anger is there, and it's not there and it's bad, it's there. um that allows for, as you said, that directionality, that allows for that deeper inquiry. Okay, well, why is anger showing up? What am I angry about? And is there something there? And this is a topic that seems to keep coming up in these conversations. I think both of us have an interesting relationship with anger. That boundary thing again. It's like, okay, is there
Yeah.
a boundary that's being crossed, or something that's not okay for me? But yeah, there's definitely a lot of power in these things when we do start to create that sense of acceptance. And yeah, acceptance, surrender. I mean, there's a little bit of a difference there, and slightly different energies to that. Um, I think something that feels a little universal is really just that absence of judgment of those things, and seeing if we, instead of moving to judgment, we move to a little bit of curiosity, which is hard to hold at the same time as anger, right? Because curiosity, I mean, even just saying that word feels slight. It's like, oh no, there's a lightness to it. So
Yeah,
there's a lot to explore here.
there is. And the type of coaching that I'm most interested in, whether I am the coach or the client, usually starts more, or I think if I backtrack, there is a belief that coaching is uh, the person is here. There's a real problem in their life that they need to fix. Coach helps client fix and solve that problem, and then we move on with our life.
Mm-hmm.
And the coaching that I am most interested in is more helping the client build the awareness around what's really happening, what's underneath that thing that you have made up is a problem. And
Mm.
I realized that I think for the first 10 minutes of this conversation, we've been speaking a little bit abstractly. So I'm going to check in with myself around like what's a personal example that I am willing to share in this moment. And I'll invite you to do the same. Yeah, this one's a little raw because I'm working through it right now, and I still am in the inquiry of what's the direction I want to take this. But in my accounting career, which is my background, that's what I went to college for, and I still do part time, as you know. And there's been a constant resistance to, I know where I want to be. I have this vision of helping people feel whole and doing healing work. And I have all these beautiful visions of a world. I want to be in a world where people feel safe to be themselves exactly as they are. And I think as a practitioner, especially in the beginning of my career, I didn't have the skill set to do that. I just knew I wanted to do that. And so I was kind of I've been stuck for a lot of my coaching career around, I know where I want to be. And I think one of the parts that I've had the toughest time with is that I have a fear of showing up and being seen, or at least historically I have.
Mm.
And so instead of trying to crush that out of my system, a lot of my inner work has been what's amazing about the part of me that doesn't want to be seen. And there's a real tenderness there. There's a well, I think that's where I get my gift of really seeing the best in other people and shining light on where other, like if my client has a part of themselves that they really don't like, they don't like that they're shy, they don't like that they're awkward, they don't like that they're afraid to speak up at a meeting or something like that. There's a million different versions of it. I'm able to say, hey, that there's nothing faulty about you. That's a beautiful strategy that you've developed in your life. What's the gift in that? What has that strategy done for you? And
Mm,
helping to see, maybe you want to speak up at the meeting, and we're not trying to change that. We're just trying to say, hey, where did that come from? Why are you scared to speak up at the meeting?
mm,
And there's a real compassion that can be forged there around, oh, when I was little, if I spoke up, my dad might have, he either yelled at me, or my mom might have said you're not good enough, or there's so many reasons that speaking up was not a good strategy. Being authentic was not the best strategy. And a lot of times we realize in our 20s, 30s, 40s and on, well, we're not five anymore, but we've developed parts of ourselves that think that we're five. And so,
mm,
yeah, I think that's a long-winded way of saying these strategies have been so beautiful and in serving us in some way in our life if we slow down enough to see that. And we can also realize, and that's not really the way that we want to show up to our present life. So
mm,
then that's where the acceptance really comes in of, yeah, good, beautiful job for protecting me, and you don't need to do that anymore. There's something else that you can do to be productive for me.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing something that's so alive and so tender, Mike. And I think it's a great way to illustrate the point here, and to understand the nature of this acceptance. And um, as you talk through, because it was sort of already landed in that almost like that solution stage, right? Of like why, because that's the first step. Okay, when we understand why, then intervening in that makes a little more sense. It reminds me of the work of Gabor Mate. He talks about this a lot, that the things that we see expressed that might seem somewhat dysfunctional are actually the things that protected us way back when. And so it's really, really important to acknowledge that. And I want to offer a little distinction, because this acceptance is absolutely beautiful and essential, I think. And we've talked about this a lot. And as we both work as coaches, and how essential it is to really reach that stage of, okay, it is what it is. You can't fight against reality. Well, you can try, but you probably lose 100% of the time. Byron Katie coined something like that. But there's a really beautiful distinction when you get to that stage of, okay, how am I going to intervene in this? So I know that it's okay to be here, and I also want something different for myself.
Hmm.
And here is this really interesting distinction between why and what for.
Mm.
Because when we ask why, we can sort of we can validate and go, well, I did it then, and it worked then, so that's why I'm still doing it. But then when we go what for, it almost stretches it out a little, and creates a little more room to intervene and go, oh, okay, I'm doing that so that people don't judge me, and then I get kicked out of the group, or whatever it might be. But I'm realizing now actually it's having the opposite effect. So the what for is no longer working. So maybe there's something else that we can do, something else that we can experiment with. So it's a really interesting distinction that allows us to sort of open up into the future. So that looking back is important, right? It's really validating all of those experiences and going, okay, where I am today makes a lot of sense. But now there's this opportunity, there's this place I get to go. So that present moment is the acceptance. And in that present moment as well, we get to create the opportunity for the future. So it's something I came across. I don't even know where I found it, but it's something I came across recently, and it feels important in this context that we've looked at.
Mm. What for? Yeah, that is a powerful distinction between why. What for seems to imply it's built into the question is what how has this been a beautiful strategy? How has this served you in some way? What has this done for you? And
Mm,
I really love that. Gabor Mate also, it's so interesting that you brought him into the conversation because I know that he just released a new book and he's unpacking a lot of this stuff that we're talking about today.
mm,
And yeah, he does a lot of great work in it seems like in any area that we talk about, you could point back to Gabor Mate around understanding behavior and
mm,
not treating Gabor Mate happens to look at it from an addiction lens, and there's a way in which that's one of the most extreme examples. But underneath almost any strategy that we have in our behavior, there's a pain that we are avoiding, or there's a vision that we're running to. But typically, with behaviors that we would categorize as destructive or not helpful in our everyday life, it's because
mm.
we are avoiding some sort of pain in our life.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, his work is very very interesting, very inspiring. He's really been a pioneer in that new perspective around addictions and why we do what we do. That had an interesting moment this week actually, 'cause Gabor's been doing a fair bit of promotion around his work lately, and one of the other people I really respect in the area of psychology, psychiatry, thought leadership is Jordan Peterson. And I heard a conversation with Gabor that was directly in opposition to Jordan Peterson. I was like, oh, wow, okay. And I love those opportunities because I think it's really important that we don't have gurus, right? That we put everything through our filter. And it's very easy to go, oh, I really like Jordan Peterson. I'll listen to everything that he says as gospel. And I really like Gabor Mate. I listen to everything he says as gospel. But when they're in opposition, it's like, oh, okay, now I get to make a decision about which one's the truth for me, right? And the truth is relative. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. But it's that there's just so many different viewpoints we can take on these sort of things. So even distilling that down to this idea of acceptance, we need to look at what that means for us, and how to digest that in our own sort of system, and how we're going to act from that place. And so much of it really is in just being with ourselves and being honest with ourselves, being truthful in the way that we look at the situation, even if it is not a particularly nice truth, right?
Mm,
So there's no right way, there's no ultimate answer, there's no ultimate truth, but there's some of these foundational pieces that can help get that perspective.
mm. There's so much here. There's so much here. I love that. Hmm, what direction do I want to take this in? I think there's a way in which a lot of us we think that if we are a fan of one person and then that person speaks outwardly against another, this is actually a really silly example, but I had a phase in high school, or maybe it was middle school actually, where I really loved rap music. And I loved 50 Cent and I loved G Unit, and I also liked a lot of Fat Joe's songs. I don't know if you're familiar with all the artists that I've named, but there was at the VMAs, which was a musical award ceremony one year. I remember they had a massive beef with each other. They were really going at it, and at that age, I mean, in that point in my development, I felt like I had to pick a side. I said, I'm not listening to Fat Joe's music anymore. I like 50 Cent. I like G Unit. Um, it seems like a silly example, but that is a lot of the way our society is oriented. Is whose side are you on? Is it are you here or are you there? Are you Democrat? Or are you Republican? Are you gay or are you straight? And it doesn't have to be. There's a little bit of Jordan Peterson isn't categorically wrong about everything, and Gabor Mate can't possibly be categorically correct about everything.
Mm.
there's going to be nuggets of wisdom that you get from both of them. And even though they might speak out against each other, it doesn't mean that you can't. I think what you're pointing to is listen to all the people, continue cultivating knowledge and wisdom and learning, but check in with yourself about what feels true to you.
Mm.
And that's another dance that we do is individually, what does knowing look like, and then where do we go to learn from other people.
Yeah.
And so life is always that there's a lot of different harmonies, polarities, things that might seem in opposition, that if we slow down enough, we realize both things can be true in different
Mm.
contexts.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah. It's something interesting that comes up for me as you frame that as well. And I feel like it connects back to this idea of being in acceptance of something while also inviting something new and different, better, maybe even into your world. And that is the concept of desire, right? Because when you're in a certain situation that you don't want, inherently there's something else that you want, right? Because it's all relative. And there's this Buddhist idea that it's not okay to want things, right? That you shouldn't have desires, kind of the root of all evil. It's an ego game, right? And I had this really interesting perspective on that as well. It's like, well, what if you could actually want the process of wanting, or desire the process of desiring? Does that then cancel out that negative effect? Because you know it's a part of your nature is to be somehow yearning for something. And there's a certain beauty in acknowledging that as well. And I feel like that sort of lines up really beautifully with this acceptance thing. It's like I'm allowed to want because there's a beauty in the nature of wanting. And again, that goes sort of directly in opposition with this Buddhist principle of wanting is bad, right? That it's going to cause problems. And I think it's just a slightly different way of looking at something that brings about a different energy to it. And that just really touched me when I heard that. I thought, wow, because it's very easy to make yourself wrong for wanting, right? Because it's not spiritual. I want this nice car, or a nicer couch, that I can, a bigger TV, whatever it might be. Listing material things here, but it might be something to do with the business or the nature of the people. It doesn't really matter. But we make ourselves wrong for wanting because somehow it's not spiritual, or not. You're not a good person if you want these material things. But I think there's some sort of sense of denial of the human experience in that, in some level. And so we get to kind of look at these things and expand them and try them on for fit. And not to say that this Buddhist concept is wrong. Of course, it has its purpose. But we're also having a human experience as well as a spiritual one. And so much of the work is in integrating both of those and understanding that we're kind of in both curriculums. It's
Yes.
not one or the other. So
Mm.
mm,
This seems like it could be a whole separate conversation in and of itself around. I think a lot of our journeys or a lot of coaches that I am in community with are sitting in the inquiry of what are the best parts of the Western world and the Eastern world, and how can
mm,
I integrate all of it together. And I think I want to caveat, I'm not someone who has really deeply immersed myself into Buddhist philosophy, but as it just my armchair theory, I think that Buddhism is so popular in Western societies because we have we have outsourced a lot of our fulfillment and happiness and contentment onto material things, and we haven't done collectively as a society nearly enough inner work. And Buddhism, and in America and other Western civilizations, there's a lot of I'll be happy if I have XYZ thing. And Buddhism is a very grounding philosophy and practice around I've got enough exactly where I am.
mm,
And so it's almost a necessity in our culture because we are so
mm,
busy thinking, this product for my skin or for my hair or this outfit or this car or this experience. Like we project so much of our fulfillment onto things or experiences, when Buddhism says, well, look within first.
Mm,
And so uh want and desire, then if you come from a place of I'm already doing inner work, I've cultivated stillness, and there's a way that we can say I want and desire these things, and I know that I'm going to be just fine without them.
mhm,
Where I think the West and the East collide with each other in an integrated and beautiful way. That is something that I certainly aspire to. Where, yeah, it would be nice to live in a house that I have a gym or something like that. And
mm,
also, I know that I can be just perfectly fulfilled without that.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and it speaks to that paradox that we sort of started with, doesn't it? And I think, yeah, for me personally, I think so much of my work is in being okay with that potentiality existing, and even excited for the existence of that without having it. Right? And it's
Mhm.
cultivating these practices of patience and discipline. So I think that's a little bit where a bit of confusion can come in if we come back to that original topic we started with of acceptance. Some people can assume that there's a certain sense of apathy implied there, that oh,
Yes.
why I'm not going to go after these things because I'm okay with how it is. And it's again, it's both. It's I'm okay, like I've got everything that I need, and there's a certain potentiality out there that I'm aware of and that I'd actually like to pursue. And because there's that desire of the desire and wanting of that wanting. And if we can fall in love with that process, really, and it's very cliche, isn't it? Falling in love with the journey instead of the destination. But it's really what it comes down to.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, I know that we're pushing up on our time boundary. And do you have any closing thoughts, anything, any loops you want to close from things that we said earlier, or anything that we haven't already introduced in today's conversation that you would like to invite in now?
Oh, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. We've touched a lot of different concepts, and um, I feel like we've closed sort of most loops that are still kind of open in my mind. But again, I want to thank you for bringing in something personal and tangible into this space as well, because I think that always helps, and just to remind people as well that there's so much nuance in life, and we get to continue exploring and being curious about our narratives and the way that we see the world. There's no right or wrong or good or bad way. It's really just it's an exploration. That's what it is.
Mm,
Mm,
yeah, I love that. I had one thought that it's been bubbling and rattling around my mind for a decent amount of this. And I don't even know if it necessarily fits very well, but I'm just gonna name it. It could be really profoundly transformational to name when you are actually unwilling to accept the situation too. If that's what your inner knowing is telling you, I'm not willing to accept this right now, instead of trying to
mm,
mentally override it and say, I know acceptance is the thing and I need to love myself as I am or whatever. If that's not true to you, there's a real power in the meta move is accepting your unacceptance, essentially, right? I am
mm,
unwilling to shift. I'm still triggered and fucking angry right now. And I'm
mm,
gonna just be there. And
mm,
I that has been one of the moves. It's a black belt kind of move, and I'm still really getting the hang of that because I like to just I want to skip all the steps. I know what the end result is gonna be. It's like, yes,
mm,
feel the anger, let it move through me, blah blah blah. But when I can really own, like, no, I'm fucking angry right now, or I'm really upset, I just need to be in that, then the system can settle as well. So I did want to name that.
mm,
and and thank you so much for always having these meaningful, rich, very in-depth conversations with me. They always leave me thinking, and I know that there's so much territory that we covered today, and I look forward to
mm,
the next one. Audience members, thank you so much for tuning in. We love this community, and yeah,
mm.
I look forward to the
Yeah.
next one.
Yeah, and I think I just want to really like highlight what you've just shared, Mike, because I think that's a beautiful capstone to this conversation. We really are in that human curriculum, and being pissed off is your thing right now, and be pissed off, whatever is there. We don't have to go straight to acceptance. So I think that's really beautiful what you said, a little meta, but really, really appropriate. Being in an acceptance of the fact that you're just not going to accept what's going on, and that's great. I love that. So thank you for sharing, and yeah, thank you to everybody who tuned in. Keep enjoying the human curriculum, enjoying the spiritual curriculum, or be in resistance to it. That's fine too. But
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for engaging. Always a pleasure.
Bye, everyone.